All right, great. Great. Do you have any question? I welcome us to today's training. And apologies for missing out yesterday's training. Do you have any question? Any question from our last class? Any questions so far? Any question? Any question from anyone? Okay. So that means the class was clear. Okay, let me ask. Daniel Shularin, what was your take home?
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So from last class, we started with how standards are very important, like how it applies to our daily day-to-day life. I give several examples from what's it called, like the left-hand driving in Nigeria, that's compared to the one in what's it called Kenya also. They also mentioned that electricity cables, how everything how every electricity cables, the same electricity cable that is used in Nigeria, same used everywhere. So how all these has to do with standards, and also um,
Okay, I think that's fine. Let's have Akpino Uyi. What was your take home from last class?
Yes, good evening. Thank you very much. So, from last class, I hope you can hear me, please.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So, from last class, you emphasized the importance of having standards, and then stressing that ISO is an international standard that is, um, that it is something that has been generated with by nations coming together to agree on a standard that would work. And then you make reference to, in addition to other examples that someone mentioned earlier, you made reference to traffic light. That imagine if there isn't an standard for traffic lights and for the color coding, where the traffic light it says red and then that means stop. And that if it was separate for all countries and in other areas, then it might be a problem. It might cause accidents. You also said something about ISO 27,000 family. We have I think 27,001, which is the for ISMS itself. We have ISO 27,002, which talks about the defines the guidelines for implementing the ISMS, and then it's mentioned something about ISO 27,701, which is like relating to both ISO 27,001 and ISO 20,002. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. That's nice. That's nice. You showed that we followed through the class. So today we want to look at fundamental concepts and principles of information security. How I am going to take you through this training. I will not just run through materials for you. I'll take you through the training structurally, in the sense that I've started with what ISO standards are. I'll look at fundamental concepts and principles of information security. I'll look at what gap assessment is. If I want to follow the material, they talked about the clauses before they got to gap assessment. But if you want to actually understand it, you need to start with gap assessment first before you go to the clauses. So that's how I'm going to train you. And then we cannot talk about ISO 27001 or information security without looking at fundamental concepts and principles of information security. Because we are going to talk about, as we are going on whether in implementation, whether in auditing, whether in this training, anywhere, you are going to use these terminologies in your implementation or in your auditing, especially when you are dealing with anything that talks about information security, not just 27,001, anything that speaks to information security, cyber security, even if it is NIST cybersecurity framework, even if it is the CBN cybersecurity framework, we are going to talk about these important concepts, right? And then we are going to run through them. I know that some of us are familiar with these concepts before now, and then we are going to run through these concepts during the course of the training today. So we are starting with what information and asset is. What information and asset is. Now, what is information? According to the documents, according to the author, the information is any meaningful data. So any data that is meaningful to you, that makes sense to you, that has meaning, is information. Then what is an entity? What is an asset? An asset is an item, thing, or entity that has potential or actual value to an organization. So what this is saying is that an information in itself is an asset to you, because if something makes meaning to you, and then if that thing has value to you, right, you can categorize that thing as an asset. You know that gone are those days where things are done traditionally. Currently, information is the new oil. Like, you need information. You need information to stay abreast of maybe important news or details of maybe a particular culture or career, or you want to learn about something, you need that information. So it's meaningful to you. And that information is also part of an asset, right? Because there are some information that you will keep because those information holds value to you, and you're not going to give it out to anybody. And then that information at that particular time becomes an asset. Now we have personal or individual assets, and then we have organizational assets. Now, examples of personal or individual assets are virtual assets such as your bank accounts, medical data, email accounts, and digital customer identity. These are informations also. Your bank account is an information. Your email account is an information because it's a meaningful data and you don't want to give it out to anybody. Your digital customer identity for the different platforms that you use, financial platform or any platform, whether it's a courier service or e-commerce service, it's a meaningful data. Those are your personal or individual assets. And then personal or individual assets, you also have physical assets like your personal devices like your PC, your laptops, and the likes. And if you have organizational assets that are not personal to you as a person, as an individual, which is number one, online branding. Branding is also an asset. Reputation is an asset. Business plan is an asset. Company's business plan. I was in training like this few years ago. I was taking a training, and some of the students in Ghana mentioned to me that whenever they want to do a business with another, whenever they want to build a product, rather, whenever they want to build a product, they observe that a competitor builds exact same product that they build at that particular time. And then it happened once, twice, thrice. So it is not a coincidence anymore. It is because somebody is pushing out plans, business plans, project data that they have within the organization, and they are pushing them out. So it's an asset. It's also an information. It's meaningful to the organization. Intellectual property, right? And then physical assets such as servers, connected cables, and workstation. These are assets also. Now, why are we talking about information? Why are we talking about assets? Because, as I mentioned in the last class, you cannot protect what you don't have. So what is not an asset to you, what does not belong to you, you may not have the power to protect it. And then what you have, what belongs to you, that you don't know belongs to you, you can also not protect it. So 27,001 will help you identify all the assets you have within your organization, from your physical assets to your virtual assets. In fact, most organizations have moved away from physical assets. Like, physical assets, when you see physical assets in organization, maybe physical servers in some cases, that is for organizations that have their data center, or maybe they are just some servers domiciled within their physical location, and maybe laptops and desktops, and maybe cabling systems cables. But in most cases, you will see that a lot of assets that organizations hold now are virtual assets, and then they are important. And I did an audit for an organization some time ago, and then the man mentioned that, oh, we are full. It's a full cloud company. We don't need an anti-malware. And I laughed, because it is called cloud does not mean it is somewhere that nobody can touch. It is just your physical data center, servers, network, all of them put together, hosted by another person. And depending on the kind of structure, the cloud service model that you use, that is when you will know whether you need an anti-malware solution or not. And then I had to educate that person at that particular time. So a lot of organizations are moved from physical assets to digital or virtual assets. But this part is just to tell us what information is, what an asset is. So an information is any meaningful data. So once that meaningful data is processed, it becomes an asset because it is important to you, and you can use it to get meaning and build up the organization or whatever you want to do. Right. Also, as we go on in this training, you hear documents, you hear specification, you hear records. Now, what are documents? A document is information and the medium on which it is contained. Now, let me ask a question. Elsie, give a typical example of a document. Like, what just comes to mind when you hear document? What comes to your mind?
Maybe a company's policy.
Company's policies. Very good. Company's policy. And when we talk about documents, what are we talking about? Is it hard copy or soft copy?
It could be either.
Great. So it could be either hard copy or soft copy. Now, for those that are paying for the exam, separate from the 33 initiative, and for those that will be selected to write the exam for free, a typical exam question will be, if an organization have their information security, okay, incident management policy on their incident management tool, is that conformity? Is that a document or not? Yes, that is a document. That is conformity. Because look at the definition. The definition says information, a document is information and the medium on which it is contained. It is not saying a document is an hard copy or a document is soft copy. So what this is saying is that if you go to a company's website and you see their privacy policy, that privacy policy on their website is a document, because the information is on their website and the website is the medium in which that information is contained. If you go to your incident management, maybe you are using Jira, you are using Manage Engine or Service Desk or Fresh Desk, any tool you are using. If on that incident management tool, the incident management policy is domiciled, is stated there, that is a document, because that is the information and the medium on which that information is contained. So that is what a document is. Then we have specification. Within documents, there are specifications. And once a document contains requirements, it is a specification. Let me give a typical example. Your mobile device policy is a document. So you know that policy that they will give you in your company. They'll tell you, don't use this laptop to do this. Don't connect to open Wi-Fi. Don't take it out of the country. Don't do this. That mobile device policy is a document. Now, all of those do's and don'ts, those requirements, those things you are required to do to be in compliance with that document, with that policy, those are specifications, because it specifies what they need you to do. Do not connect to open Wi-Fi. Do not connect to core banking application without using a VPN. Do not do this, do not do that, do this and do that. Ensure that the device is in a suitcase, blah, blah, blah. Whatever document it is, even if it is incident management, if it is cloud security policy, if it is whatever document it is, as long as there are requirements, there are things that are stated inside of it that you need to do, and you need to be in compliance with, those things are requirements, and that document is called a specification. Now we have records. Records are documents that states achieved results. Records are documents that states achieved results. Let me give a typical example. Clause 9.3, management review. By the time we get to the management clauses, you will see that clause 9.3 is called management review. Now, In most organizations, they usually have what we call a management review policy or a management review procedure. So that policy or procedure guides how management review will be done. So that is a document. Within that document, there can be specification. Now that's a policy. The outcome of the implementation of that policy is what we call the record. Let me say, for instance, I come to audit your company. You have a fantastic policy for management review. I will now ask you, this policy, show me evidence of implementation. Evidence of implementation will now be, okay, you can show me calendar invites to top management to attend the management review. You can show me meeting minutes. So meeting minutes is a record of that activity from that policy. Do we understand? I need us to give me emojis, maybe thumbs up if you understand what I'm trying to say. Okay, great, great, great. So a document stating results achieved or providing evidence of activities performed is called a record. Another typical example is your risk assessment. You have a risk assessment manual or risk assessment framework or risk assessment policy or process document, however you call it. The outcome, the implementation of that risk assessment, the identification of threats, impacts, likelihood, threats, vulnerabilities, impact, likelihood, the multiplication, getting your risk score, that is your record because it shows the activity, the result of the activity from that policy or that manual that you have documented. You don't need to cram these things, just know them by heart. And then we have information security. The information security is the preservation of confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. We talked about this from the last class. It determines what information needs to be protected, why it should be protected, how to protect it, and what to protect it from. Information security covers information of all kinds, such as printed or handwritten. So whatever information, whether it is printed, whether it is handwritten, whether it is transmitted via email, or whether it is transmitted via the website or mentioned during a conversation, information security covers all of those information. And then organizations can ensure information security by implementing appropriate policies. And that is why you see that as 27,001. Remember when we were defining management system and ISMS, it says it's an interacting element containing policies, procedures, and associated resources. So when you're implementing information security, you will need policies, you will need controls that align with your objectives. And that is why 27,001 is there to serve as a framework. So 27,001 will guide you. We tell you the kind of policies you can have in place, the kind of controls you can have in place, and it helps you reduce your vulnerabilities and then mitigate your threats. Right. So what is confidentiality? What is integrity? And what is availability? Confidentiality is the property that information is not made available or disclosed to unauthorized individuals, entities, or processes. So what this is saying is people that should not have access to information should not have access to it. And that's what confidentiality typically means. That this information, you are not supposed to have access to it, then do not have access to it. And that is why you see some principles around password, authentication, and the likes. We have integrity. Integrity is the property of accuracy and completeness. Property of accuracy and completeness. And that this is where you are going to see things around cryptography, so that people do not modify, people do not tamper with information that has been documented, information that has been made available, and then there's accuracy and completeness of such information. Availability, property of being accessible and usable on demand by an authorized entity. Very complete definition. Because beyond the fact that the information is accessible and available, it must be accessible and usable and available only to authorized entity. Now, why do we need to know this definition? I know that some of us already know this definition. By the time you get your risk assessment, because you are going to carry out an assessment of risk on the confidentiality of the information, the integrity of the information, the availability of the information. I need to know which one that threat will affect the most. Because when you carry out your risk assessment, your threat may affect confidentiality more than integrity and availability. Let me give a typical example. If you carry out a risk assessment on laptop and that laptop gets stolen, Lawal Shaliwa, you carry out a risk assessment on laptop within your organization and the laptop gets stolen. So what information security triad do you which part of these three do you think that threat will affect most? Is Lawal on the call? Okay.
Hello. Sorry, I didn't get your question.
Okay. Let's say you are carrying out an assessment of risks on your laptop. Let's pick out laptop from all the assets. Now, the assessment you are carrying out on that laptop, the threat is theft. If that threat were to materialize and that laptop was stolen, which of these three do you think will be affected most? The laptop was stolen.
Confidentiality.
Why?
Because if I'm trying to make an investigation or trying to audit the thing and it was stolen, that means I have what I have researched will be on the laptop and it can get leaked to the person that stole the laptop.
Okay. Who has a contrary opinion?
Good evening, this is Peter speaking.
Yeah, Peter.
I think I would say availability.
Why?
Yeah, because the laptop that carries the records that you are auditing is no longer has been stolen. Now, it doesn't make the record available to you anymore, or whoever needs to go through that record in the process of the audit as well.
Okay, I'm having more hands. Akpino Oyin.
Yes. Well, I would
Yeah.
also go with availability because so while the laptop might be stolen, well, if the proper security the disk encryption system has been installed on the laptop, the person that stole the laptop might not have access to the information. However, the information that the auditor would need to get from the laptop will not be available. So I would say availability here is the one that has the higher likelihood to affect that process. Thank you.
Okay. Because of time, let's go on. So John and Emmanuel, thank you. If you the question says the laptop was stolen, right? We did not say whether the laptop is encrypted, because if the laptop is encrypted, right? Because the threat is on the laptop. If the laptop is encrypted, the person will not be able to take anything from the laptop. In fact, if the company has an MDM and the company is able to remote wipe, the person has no access to the device. Or if the only thing, let's say the company use Google Drive, and then the once they yank off the email from that device, the person has no access to any information, then confidentiality is not affected. But that laptop that was stolen, the threats, which is the theft, is affecting availability more. Right? So, and that's why we need to understand confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But by the time we are carrying out an assessment of risk, we'll be able to get more insight to that. When we get to risk assessment, we'll see, because we are going to practicalize risk assessment, we'll see more of that. Okay, so confidentiality, talked about it, authentication methods, data access policy, blah blah blah. We can read up all of this. Integrity, I've talked about it. Also, availability, I've talked about it. Right. So we can read more on this. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. I've unmuted. Okay. So that's on confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now, let's go to another information security concept: vulnerability. Vulnerability, what's the definition of vulnerability? Vulnerability is the weakness of an asset or control that can be exploited by one or more threats. The weakness of an asset or control that can be exploited by one or more threats. Now, Michelle Emmanuel, what do you understand by this part, weakness of an asset or control? Can you explain to us?
The weakness of an asset, and what I understand is looking at the attack surface of an asset where we have areas in which a threat actor can exploit vulnerabilities.
Okay. So the definition says weakness of an asset or control. So what do you have to say about the control part?
Okay, in terms of controls, if they are not adequate controls like preventive controls or deterring controls for a particular asset, if they are not correctly implemented, there might be some loopholes in which a threat actor might be able to exploit.
Great. So you mentioned something first that I would have flagged, but you corrected yourself. You said if there were no adequate control, like there are no controls, no. So when we say weakness of a control, it is saying there is the existence of a control, there's presence of a control, which is what you mentioned, but that control is still weak. Let me use an example I usually use for classes like this. I have a friend of mine that works in a courier company, very popular. If I call the name, you will know the name of the company. Now, the first time I went to that company, I got to the gates. I got there, said, oh, who are you looking for? I'm looking for John Doe. I'm looking for John Doe. Okay. Do you have an appointment with John Doe? I said, yes, I have an appointment with him. Is it official? I said, no, it's not official. Okay. Can you call John Doe? I called him. So when I called him, I spoke to him, then I gave them the phone, they spoke to him also. So okay. So they gave me a document, logbook. I wrote down my name, I signed in, they gave me visitor's badge, and then they escorted me to his office. Very fantastic control, very fantastic process. That is a control to do what? To eliminate, to close out threats. Let me not say eliminate, because you cannot totally eliminate threats right now, but it's a control to put in place and then reduce the materialization of the threat of maybe theft or damage or any other thing. Now, because of familiarity, over time I was going there, sometimes I go there, I tip the security guys, I give them money at this, we gist also sometimes. Because of that familiarity, once I get to the gate of the company, I just greet them at the gate. Alpha. We greet ourselves, and then I move on straight to his office area. Now, there's a control, but there's a failure in the control. That's a vulnerability. Now, another thing is, there's also, before you get into the office area, there's a door, an access control door, that you need to put your thumb before you get in. And because I'm not a staff, I cannot access. But that door also was faulty in the sense that if anybody, whether they have your thumb in the database or not, the moment you put your thumb on that door, it opens. That is another control, but it is weak, and that's a vulnerability. The vulnerability is the weakness of an asset or control that can be exploited by one or more threats. But then vulnerabilities that do not have corresponding threats may not require controls, but should be recognized and monitored for changes. So what this is saying is that there can be vulnerabilities, but there are no corresponding threats that could exploit them. But then there needs to be continual monitoring of your threat landscape to ensure that that vulnerability does not have a new threat that can exploit it. And then the vulnerability is not the one that will cause the impact. The vulnerability is just a gateway. the threat itself will be the one to cause that impact. When we get to threat, we are going to see that. So also controls that are implemented incorrectly or controls that malfunction could become vulnerabilities. So if you have controls in place also and you do not implement them correctly, they become vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities. So examples of vulnerabilities. Now, why is it important also that you understand what vulnerabilities are, what threats are? When I audit companies sometimes too, you will see that they will write a vulnerability for a threat. They will write a threat for a vulnerability. And the moment you miss out on risk assessment, when you are implementing 27001 or information security, you may necessarily not get much value from that implementation, because risk assessment is the one that gives you the idea and helps you to select appropriate controls that you can put in place within your organization. So you need to have that understanding of what vulnerabilities are and what threats are. Right. So examples of vulnerabilities are insufficient periodic replacement scheme for equipment. Now, if you do not replace equipment or you do not maintain equipment, it is not a threat, but it is a vulnerability that can be exploited by damage. Damage is the threat. You understand? Can be exploited by damage. For instance, we saw the fire outbreak on the island, right? Let's say the fire started, just an assumption. I don't know what happened, but an assumption. Let's assume that the fire started small, and then they had fire extinguishers in place, right? They had fire extinguishers, and let's even say they have FM 200 or FM 2000 in place, that fire suppression system in place. But let's assume also that that fire extinguisher is faulty or has not been maintained over time. You can see that that's a vulnerability that was now exploited by the threats, which is what? The fire. So vulnerabilities are gateway to materialization of threats, to materialization of damage and impact on organizational assets. And that is why we need to also monitor those vulnerabilities. So we have various examples of vulnerabilities that we can read up on. We have uncontrolled downloading and use of software. Now, people download software, they just download, jump pack in their system. That's a vulnerability. It can be exploited by a virus. The virus is the threat. And then the virus can exploit uncontrolled downloading and use of software within the organization, right? Absence of personnel is a vulnerability and can be exploited. Sometimes I audit organization, they tell you, we have fire extinguisher in place, we have a fire marshal, and I ask them, where is the fire marshal? The fire marshal is not on ground. Absence of a personnel. So that means when there's actual fire, there is nobody to support the organization through the fire management procedure. And in some cases, you will ask them, okay, use this fire extinguisher, and then they will be lost. They will not be able to use it because the personnel, the person that is using that, managing that particular process is not available. Incorrect use of software and hardware, insufficient physical, we have a lot of vulnerabilities that you can think about, right? That you can think about. So we have security testing and evaluation. I know that some of our people on the call, Robinson, please run us through what you understand by vulnerability assessment and penetration tests, or just security testing and evaluation. Just tell us your understanding.
All right. So vulnerability assessment and penetration testing, is what I do on a day-to-day basis. So my understanding of it is when you are basically what's it called? When vulnerability assessment is just basically when you are trying to assess a system or an application, right? You are not going in depth. You are not actually breaking anything basically. While penetration testing, like the word connotes, is when you are actively probing the system, to check for vulnerabilities, to check for what can possibly go, wrong. So, and I also like to categorize penetration testing as something that gives you business logic flaws, right? Vulnerability assessments are just things that you can actually use scanners, the likes of Bobsu, Checkmarks, Veracode, and the likes of them, depending on what we're actually talking about here. But, I'm actually using these tools because this is more like my day to day, right? When you're doing vulnerability assessment, depending on the angle where you're coming from, if you're a GRC person, vulnerability assessment to you will be different from when a technical person is actually probing systems and all of that. So depending on what tool is in use, you're just basically trying to uncover things that would scanners would definitely find. Then when you're actually doing penetration testing, you are trying to find things that tools will not find, because tools they have a predefined set of rules. They don't actually speak to industry. So let me take for instance now, if I run a scan on an asset that belongs to Dangote refineries, right? Or Dangote group of companies, the vulnerabilities it will find will still be the same way, the same vulnerabilities that when I scan an asset that belongs to a banking institution, right? Let me take for instance First Bank now. That's the same thing it's going to return, because um, they are not built to actually find business logic flaws. So to summarize everything I've been saying so far, vulnerability assessment is actually, like the word connotes, you are trying to assess vulnerability, to actually assign severity, to actually assign CVSS score and all of that. Then penetration testing is actually when you are actively probing the system to actually find out, or to actually uncover business logic vulnerabilities.
All right, thank you, Robinson. So, by the way, Robinson is a penetration tester and is good at it. So, if you want to carry out internal and external VAPT, you can reach out to him. We are still going to do introduction on the group tonight. So everybody will drop their pictures, your location, your name, and any other thing we can know about you, right? So that we get to know ourselves and what you do also, in case somebody has a job for you, right? So we are going to do that. So this is just this is a diagram showing a network switch. You can see the LAN, blah blah blah, the remote server and the likes, and then talking about security testing and evaluation, right? So whilst we talk about vulnerabilities can speak to, there can be technical vulnerabilities, and then there can be vulnerabilities that are not technical. For instance, absence of personnel is not technical, right? Lack of maintenance is not technical also, right? But there are some technical vulnerabilities, and that is where system testing and evaluation comes in, where you try to look at the vulnerabilities, look at the loopholes, weakness within a particular system, a network, right? Or you try to act as a bad guy and then get into a system, right? So that's just describing technical vulnerabilities to us. And Mr. Robinson, thank you for that also. Right, so you can see assessment of vulnerabilities. This is penetration testing, where an hacker tries to break through the system that the organization has in place, breaks through their firewall, the controls that they have in place, and then gets into their protected file. Now, imagine an organization telling you, so what makes up an hacker, white hacker, or ethical hacker, right? Is when you have a signed agreement with an organization and they tell you that, yes, you can penetrate into our system. In fact, not just a signed agreement, the signed agreement contains the scope of what you want to penetrate into. I've seen cases where people have signed agreements with organizations, but they went beyond the scope and they found themselves in jail. So this job can put you in prison if you don't know what you are doing. So scoping is very important in vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. You understand? Especially when you are working with the government or you are working with some core private organizations, you need to ask them questions around scoping, which system, which domain, what is in scope before you carry out your penetration test. So I've seen cases where some ethical hackers, they try to penetrate into government system because they want to be known, or maybe because they want to show the people that the government is not protecting their systems well, and then they want to educate the government. If they catch you, you're in trouble. You're in a big mess because you were not. Nobody gave you the go ahead to do that, right? So in penetration testing, there is always a documented scope and agreement between both organizations. Once there is no documented agreement and scope, and you do it, then you become a threat actor, and then you be treated as such. So that is typically what penetration tests. You want to penetrate into the system. The company tells you, we have a good system, we have good control in place. Can you try to penetrate? And then you penetrate, you move money from the CFO's account, you put it in the CEO's account. You know that yes, this actual penetration testing beyond just books. Just like Ron BC mentioned, that if you use some of the tools that we have now, the kind of assessment result it will give you when you assess Dangote is the kind of assessment result it will give you when you assess a financial technology organization. So you as a vulnerability assessor and a penetration tester, also you need to be versatile and you need to be good at what you are doing, and you need to be able to also think very well and think good, so that you also, and that is why we know that systems, robots, AI cannot take the job of humans. Never going to happen. Not possible. So that's just to talk about system technical vulnerabilities and penetration tests, right? And then we have threats. We've talked about what vulnerabilities are. Vulnerabilities are weaknesses. Now, the threats are the potential cause of an information security incident. You see, this threat is the one that results in that damage. The threat is the one that exploits the vulnerability. Now, when you see questions or when you review risk assessment sheets and then you look at threats, ask yourself, this thing, can it cause damage? Like this thing in itself, is it going to cause damage, or will it be a gateway to causing a damage? And that is how you identify the difference between threats and vulnerability, because they can look alike. They can look alike. So you need to identify what a vulnerability is and what threats are. So potential cause of an information security incident that can result in damage, to a system or harm to an organization. So a threat exploits, you can see, threat exploits a vulnerability. And that is why you need to monitor your vulnerabilities. So threat exploits a vulnerability of an asset to compromise the confidentiality, integrity, and or availability. Because some threats will only compromise availability. Some threats will compromise the three of them. Some threats will compromise combination of two or more, right? So that's typically what a threat is. And then we have example of threats. So anywhere you see A means accidental, D means deliberate, E means environmental. So what this is saying is that let's pick fire. Fire can be accidental. There can be accidental fire. There can be deliberate fire. There can be environmental fire, just like those forest fire that we used to hear about. And there can be deliberate fire. I remember one time in school, it was they said, well, I don't know how authentic that information was. Something happened. They wanted to audit a department, and because the department knew that they were coming to audit them, they said one of them puts all of the documents on fire. So that's deliberate action. It's a threat. Now, because the person knew that they do not have any digital copies of that information, they put all of the physical copy. Now, if they have carried out a risk assessment on all of those documents, remember I told us assets, they carry out an assessment of risk on them. If they have carried out a risk assessment on all of those documents, and they mentioned that if there were to be fire and fire burns all of this paper, we will not have access to this information again. Okay, since you have identified that risk, what are the existing controls? Oh, we don't have any existing control. Okay, what are the controls we can now put in place? Okay, let's start digitalizing all of these documents. You can see the importance of risk assessment, and then start putting process in place to close that threats that you have identified. So there are various threats. We have water. Now, water is not flood. Water is not flood. Let me ask somebody. Titilola Ojugbele, I hope I got the name correctly. Titilola, can you tell us how water can be a threat? Like, just give us an example of water being a threat.
Good evening, everyone. So, water being a threat like we see where some parts of let's say Lagos, for example, is flooded and, cars, drown or they are being carried away and, something like that. Or at beaches when the waves are too much and if someone dives in at that moment, the waves, overturn and carries them.
Sorry, Tizilanola, can you take that again?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Please take that again.
Okay, I said, for example, like when it rains and everywhere is flooded and there are warnings that, oh, everyone should be careful, especially motorists, or especially when it's closer to a canal, and when people are not careful, maybe motorists or tricycles, and we see pictures or videos of flood carrying the cars away, or for example, maybe in at beaches when there are lifeguards there and they say don't go to this area because when the water overturns or the waves, it can carry people and stuff like that. So that's what I understand by that.
All right, that's a good example. However, I was looking for an example that is focused more on water than flood because I want to separate water from flood, right? Even though we know that it is from downpour that we have flood. Now, let me give a typical, I'll give two examples. Something happened in an organization some time ago because you can carry out a risk assessment and you think water is flood. You think flood is water and you carry out a wrong risk assessment. The company had carried out a risk assessment on flood. Then they moved their data center to the third floor. Very fantastic. Good process. Now, it means if there is heavy downpour, even if the water enters the the ground floor, there's no way to get to the third floor. If it gets to the third floor, it means the world is ending. Now, so something happened. One of the people, the personnel that managed the data center, the family came around on a Friday. So, they came around on a Friday. Everybody leaves the office on Friday. They resume back on Monday. So one of the children went to the restroom to use the restroom. The water was not, there was no water then. And then the person left the tap opened. The restroom was close to the data center. And then over the weekend, the data center had become flooded because water came and then there was flood everywhere. Now that is from water. That is not even heavy downpour, from flood. I remember also I went to audit a data center and close to the server room, close to one of the server rooms, they had a water dispenser there, and they have the dispenser bottle also there. As an auditor, the things we think about is risk, 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 risk. This thing cannot happen. How possible? Right? And then we have to tell them to move away that dispenser and that bottle away from that place because it is close to the server room. Now that is water. So water can be a threat. Also, you will see instruction from a mobile device policy or other relevant policy to say, do not drink water in front of the systems. Why? Because there can be accidental, there can be an accident and then you can pour water on the system and then you damage the system. There can be deliberate also, and then there can be environmental, that flood coming, right? So, okay, hey, as a pen tester also, you're always thinking of, yeah, so you have to just think risk. Everything you do, you think about the risk. So loss of power supply infrastructure, you can see, is also a threat. It's also a threat. When we go to carry out physical security assessment for organization, these are part of the things we review, whether you have alternate power supply, because the systems that should run on, that should be on 24/7, especially devices that help you to correlate events, so like a CCTV camera and the likes, that should be on 24/7. If you do not have alternate power supply and then there are loss of power supply, that is a threat to So we have various threats, we have sabotage, we have social engineering, we have lack of staff, blah blah blah, and the likes. And that's these threats are the one that exploits the vulnerabilities that we have in place. Now you can see relationship between vulnerability and threats, because sometimes when you carry out assessment of it, or when you review risk assessment, you will see that companies will just list vulnerabilities, they will just list threats, no relationship. Let's look at this. Warehouse unprotected and without surveillance. What is the exploitable threat? Theft. Now imagine that you are auditing a company or you are supporting an organization to implement, and then they have warehouse, the vulnerability. Let's say warehouse is the asset, the warehouse is the asset. Or let's say a machine, a critical machine within the warehouse is the asset you are carrying out an assessment on. And then the vulnerability you have identified is if warehouse is unprotected and without surveillance. And then the theft is power interruption. Does that make sense? The threat is power interruption. Does that make sense? Warehouse unprotected and without surveillance. Threat, power interruption. Like, is there a relationship between those two? Or let's say warehouse is unprotected and without surveillance, and the threat is virus. Lawal Shaliwa, do we have any relationship between these two? Any relationship between these two? All right. So Akpena said does not make sense. Now, if you look at all of these vulnerabilities and these threats, you see that there are relationships between them. Warehouse is unprotected, somebody can steal something. The data processing procedures is complicated, there can be data input error. Lack of password protection, hackers can get in. Your data are unencrypted, the information can be stolen. If you are using pirated software, there can be virus. If you don't review access rights, there can be unauthorized access by former employees. If you don't have data backup procedures, there can be power interruption. And then when power interruption are in place, you lose your data. Right? So you need to identify that relationship between vulnerabilities and threats, and then those relationship needs to align when you're carrying out your risk assessment. Power interruption, lack of data backup procedures. These two, I don't know. These two does not sound. They don't sound as if they have a good relationship. So, these are the things that you need to. These are the things that you need to review. And then we have consequences. Now, when so when threats exploit vulnerabilities, the resultant effects are what we call consequences, or what we call impacts. You can call them consequences, you can call them impacts. So remember I mentioned that there can be impacts on confidentiality, integrity, or availability. There can be impact on multiple of two or the three of them together. So if there's service interruption, it's impact on availability, unavailability of service, disruption of operation. These are examples of impacts on availability. Accidental change, deliberate change. I remember something happened in a company that I know some time ago. The database manager left the system with an intent, and then the guy made an accidental change, and they lost transaction of over 3 to 6 months ago. Understand? The person tampered with the database, so that's an accidental change. That's impact on integrity of that information. There can be deliberate change, incorrect results, incomplete results, loss of data, right? Invasion of privacy, invasion of privacy of users, invasion of privacy of employees, lack of confidential information. Understand? So these are consequences on confidentiality, and then we have various examples on that. And then so you can see the relationship also. So if the vulnerability is warehouse is unsupervised. Sorry, can we see hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
Hello?
about.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm trying to
Yeah,
look for the.
I hear you.
Okay, great. All right. So you can see the vulnerability. If warehouse is unsupervised, the threat is power interruption. And then the equipment can be stolen, what is the consequence? Financial loss, you lose money. If the area is sensitive to moisture, the vulnerability is sensitivity to moisture. The threat is corrosion. The consequence is equipment failure. For instance, your hard drive, or let's say your router. Let's say you put your router under an air conditioner, which does not make sense. Understand? So there can be equipment failure, there can be corrosion, right? Because it's sensitive to moisture. Also, complicated user interface can be exploited by data input error. And then what is the consequence? Data corruption. So various examples that we can have, and we can read up on them also. And then we have information security risk. Now we are going to get
Hello,
to
Kenny. Your screen is no longer showing.
Sorry, we can't see the screen again.
Sorry, I don't. Let me hold on. Can we see hear my voice?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. My system just started acting up. Please hold on. Let me see. Let
That
me
is it.
join with my.
That is a threat.
Hey, let me first join with my phone. Let me join with my phone, and then I'll leave. Maybe I'll quickly restart my system. I don't know. The guy just. It's been a while. I see. It's been a while. I shut it down because I've been working. I have some
Your system is a
jobs.
threat to this training.
That's a vulnerability.
Sorry, sir. So let me try to join on. Yeah. Okay. So please let me try to restart my system. So I'm trying to restart my system. Please confirm you can all hear me.
You can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. Please just I'm trying to restart my system. However, do we have anybody that is following the material bumper to bumper that can share screen? Or we just hold on. Let's just hold on. Let me quickly restart. So we are going to end tonight. By before November 14th, I want those that will be writing the exams to have written their exams. So that's my pursuit. So let's confirm if we can. If you agree to us having another class tomorrow, 7 to 8 p.m., please give a thumbs up. Okay, we have Sadiq, we have Oluwasonya, we have Akin, we have James. Okay, so let's have another class tomorrow. Let's have another class tomorrow. Let me finish up. My system is up. Let me finish up. Hold on, please. Let me try to bring out the material and then finish up. Yeah. Peter. Peter, you raised your hand.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. Just to say, I just want to make a request, please, because for those of us in the UK, the time has gone 1 hour behind. So 7 p.m. there is going to be 6 p.m. for us. I just want to make a request that can we please make it 8 to 9? So because some of us finish about, we'll be on the way home at about that 6 o'clock. and we don't know what the conditions might be. I'm just can we
Okay.
make a request for it to be 8 to 9? So it's going to be 7 for us to be comfortable if it's for us to join the class. Thank you.
It's 8 to 9. Hey, Mr. Olaide, let me ask my boss on the call because I can see that some people agree and some people don't. Olaide, what do you think?
What's that again?
So we have some people in the UK. They are 1 hour behind. If we start the training here by 7, it will be 6 p.m. there, and some of them are on their way home. So they are saying we should have the training 8 p.m. in Nigeria, so that will be 7 p.m. UK time.
We'll give a feedback to that by tomorrow.
Okay. So, but please, let's plan in between 7 to 9 p.m. tomorrow. 7 to 9 p.m. tomorrow. Let's just have it at the back of our mind that we have the training. Already will update us as per this time tomorrow, and that's why we are recording also, so that others can. Yeah, so that's why we are recording, so that others can join. Others can watch the video at a later time. All right. So let me quickly share my screen. Please, how can I get the materials? If you have not gotten the material, please share your email again on the group. Share your email again on the group. Share your email or message Olaide. Olaide will drop his Olaide will drop a chat on the group. Message Olaide, so we'll get your email. Okay, and then just reshare again, so that, or drop it here this night. Drop it in this chat so that once we are done with the training, we can quickly pick it up. Yeah. Okay, let me share my screen, and then it's so for information security risk, we are going to practicalize this. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because we are going to take the practical and then it's going to make sense to us. But just have it at the back of your mind that a risk is the effect of uncertainty on objectives. Like, you do not know the outcome. So the risk can either bring positive or negative outcome. So it's uncertainty. You are not certain about the outcome, right? And then risk is usually expressed in terms of resources, potential events, consequences. So what this is saying is you can identify your risk by identifying the threats, the sources of the risk, the likelihood of occurrence of that risk, the impact if that risk were to materialize, and a lot of other information depending on how you want to manage that, which I'm going to take us through. But basically, risks are identified from the combination of your consequence and likelihood. That's your impact and likelihood. So when you have identified an asset or a source of risk, or the risk description, or the risk in itself, you have identified the threats, you have identified the vulnerabilities, you have identified the likelihood of occurrence of that threat, you identify the impact if that threat were to materialize. The multiplication of your impacts and likelihood is what gives you your risk score. And that informs your decision whether you want to accept that risk if it is within your risk appetite, or whether you want to treat that risk in terms of modification, in terms of what's the word, avoidance and transferring, yeah, of such risk. So we will look into what risk is in much more details. Very, very fantastic. Because when we get to clause 6, we'll look at that. Right. Okay, so let's take questions. Tomorrow we'll take gap assessment. After gap assessment, we go into the implementation proper, and then by the end of next week, I think we should be done with the training, right? Or upper week. All right, so let's take questions. If you have questions, please raise your hands and then we'll call you. Raise your hand. If you have question, raise your hand. We'll call you. Yeah, I don't get Peter.
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I think that was from the previous one.
Sorry, I was muted. Sorry. I've been muted. Robinson, question.
All right. Yeah. So good evening, everybody, once again. My question is unrelated, right? But a lot has been said. You've actually taught a lot on, the topic we are actually treating. What is an information, VABT, and all the things that you actually talked on. But I have had this unconventional question to ask, and let me just go straight into it. The way lawyers have NBA, Nigerian Bar Association, they have more like a body, that guides their operations and their acts, basically. Same way doctors, nurses, they have an institution that regulates their actions. So after you are done with the normal, university program, you still go for housemanship and all of that. And they have a body that regulates some of the things they do. I believe that cybersecurity is a noble profession, right? Irrespective of the fact that it cuts across sciences, is actually a noble profession that requires this body too as well, for us to have more or less like a regulatory body. And why do I say that? And that's the reason why I said it's actually unrelated to what we are talking about. But you, Kende, you are a force in the industry, right? Irrespective of the fact that whether you are known like the them Mr. Sholakbe, Ireti, Confidence, and the likes, right? Whether people know you that much or not, but I've seen your doings. I know the kind of weight you put in the industry, right? So I was just trying to know, is there a way we can actually have more or less a regulatory body that guides our actions? And the reason why I'm asking this question is I would not like to state the incidents that happened, right? But um somebody, what's it called, hid under the pretense that he or she is a cyber security professional, learns the skills required of a penetration tester, an ethical hacker, bug bounty hunter, and all of that. He has the skills, but he's actually using it for malicious purposes, right? Helping people hack Facebook accounts, doing all manner of stuff out there. So is there a way we can actually gets like what do you call it now, a body, that regulates everything that we do? There should be a professional code of conduct. I know we talk about ethical, doing things ethically, ethical hacking and all of that, but the truth remains that because we do not have a body, because we don't have a body, that's the reason why everybody, some people, let me not say everybody, some people are actually misusing this knowledge and the skills that is being taught. Even here too, now I can tell you for a fact that even in the non-technical side of things, there are still a couple of things that a malicious person can actually think of and pretend to be a GRC expert, get a job, and misuse the opportunity that has been given to the person. So can we come together and form a body that will regulate our activity as cybersecurity professionals? Same thing that applies to lawyers that have MBA, teachers that have their own forum, doctors that have their own too, and all of that.
Yeah, it's a great one. I think we can. Somebody dropped Session. So Session is not a regulatory body, at least to my own knowledge. It's also an association, just the way we have ISACA and the likes, right? So but I think this organization, they have code of conduct. For instance, now we are going to give you certificate of training and completion of this training program for those that will not write the exam and for those that will write the exam also. And part of it, there will be a signed attestation that states that we have the right to withdraw that certificate if you are found wanting. Understand? And if they are grievous, maybe you carried out some grievous threats to organizations, right? So CBN regulates the financial technology space. So CBN is not a regulator for cybersecurity. It's just that CBN sees the need for regulation, right? Sees the need for security, and that is why you see CBN is pushing cybersecurity and like, but they are not. So I know what Robbie say is talking about, like a body on its own that identifies the cybersecurity experts that we have, right? So I've heard of cases also where even though I agree that you pay for knowledge, you understand? I've heard of cases where people charge, someone was charging newbies, I think around 200K or 300K just to install Kali Linux for them. Do you understand? So these are some of the things that regulation will do, and then it helps to know the people that are actually in the field. Understand? So neither is not regulating cybersecurity, neither is technology development agencies. So I don't think we really have that cybersecurity regulating institution, and I feel it's something that we can have in place, right? Which is a very fantastic thoughts. We are going to get there. We are going to get there. So you and I will grow also to that position. You and I will grow to that position, right? I have a friend. Before I take my mouth off that matter, this guy we grew up together. Like we grew up together. So this guy came to meet me about 4 years ago. So came to meet me about 4 years ago, and he wanted to learn cybersecurity. In fact, he had paid me. But I remember that growing up, this was what this guy was doing. This guy was doing this other, he was on this other part of life. And I was so broke then, like I needed the money. But something in me was telling me that if you do this thing, this guy gets to a position and he used this knowledge, because then I was even active in hacking. I was into pension testing and hacking then. And then something was telling me that if this guy used this knowledge and he gets caught later, and he's now narrating how he started, and he calls your name at that particular point in time, you're already up the ladder. And because of just this thing that you did when you are starting up your career, I just told the guy that, say, guy, I did busy. I know go fit train you. Say, look for another person. I just sent him the money back. Do you understand? So, and that's it. So we need that institution. The Cybercrime Act, it's an act. It's passed into law. It just guides us. It's more like a policy. Do you understand? So it's more like a policy, but we don't have that body. We do not have that body that single-handedly manages cybersecurity, identified cybersecurity organizations, understand, cybersecurity companies, professionals, and the likes, put controls in place, and like, I think we can get.
Sorry, Kehinde, I just wanted to chip in it, just so that we can wrap up this talk, right? Just like I'm just trying to explain to those that have been mentioning Nigerian cybercrime, and all the suggestions that have been given. Just like Kehinde said, some of these things do not speak to, or it is not a replica of the NBA, Nigerian Bar Association, right? It is not a replica of it, right? Nigerian Cybercrime Act is just like the something connotes. It's more like something that was passed into law. NITDA is a technology development something. They speak to data protection. Sorry, it's NDPA that speaks to, and this, the other one, the GDPR that speaks to this other one, right? So NITDA is just like how they say technology development and whatnot. So if you're a banker in Nigeria, now let me just give you an instance. Now, if you're a banker in Nigeria, you're a full-time staff in an organization, you will definitely be a member of the CIBN. CIBN is Chartered Institute of Bankers in Nigeria, whatever. I don't know how it's been pronounced, but there's something called CIBN that houses every banker in Nigeria. One of the reasons why that thing was actually formulated or that organization was actually formulated is that no one person can work for two banks at the same time, as long as you're a full-time staff, unless you're on contract and they don't find out. right? So that is what I'm actually like like the question I asked, right, in regarding to us having a regulatory body that oversees our affairs. Just like when lawyers now want to do their election, I don't know if you have lawyer friends, you get to see them posting on their status, oh, we want Akpata, we want this person to win. It's actually a very big thing, right? It is also something that we can actually do so that we can have, okay, I was trying to purchase a what's it called? I was trying to purchase a property sometime last year, and I reached out to my lawyer to help me do the documentation and all of those things. So the person was actually giving me advice of, instead of like, she's working with a what's it called? They call that thing now. She's working under a law firm. She doesn't have her own firm yet. Now I was not telling her, why can't I do this in your name? She now told me that if they find out that she's acting as a, when she's working with this particular firm, there is a different ballgame altogether. If she's an independent lawyer, it would have been a different ballgame altogether. But for the fact that she is working under a particular firm, she doesn't have that right to actually act as my lawyer. So I need to come under that firm and not under her. So if she goes ahead to do what I'm asking her to do, and they find out, they'll strip her of whatever title it is they give them when they graduate, take away the wig and all of those things, right? I tried finding ways to pursue, because by the time I made inquiries of how I was going to come under her firm, it was more costly than me me doing it with her alone. So it is actually something we can also implement in our field as cybersecurity professionals, to have things that are actually guiding us. This is not in any way to say, oh, you cannot work here, because I know that's what a lot of people do. But it's actually to curb the level of crime that is being done by people that parade themselves as cybersecurity professional. I heard that news of somebody that collected 200,000 just to install Kali Linux. Something as easy as Kali Linux that you can go to YouTube and watch videos on. Somebody collected 200,000 naira. Parading to be a cybersecurity professional, there should be punishments and sanctions for things like this. So that's just what I'm trying to talk about. Thank you.
All right. So we'll get there. We'll get there. God help us. It's not easy to set up structure. Also, it's not easy. I've managed various structures. Some have collapsed. Some are still building up, and I know that it can be tiring, especially when it is not for profit. Understand? So it is not easy, because it's harder bringing people together when you are building something that they will not gain from. It's not like they will not gain from it, but money is not the end goal. You understand? And I've seen how people can play out when you first bring them in to manage a particular program. They first come in enthusiastic. On a long run, they start looking for money. Once they don't see money, everybody push out. So yeah, we are going to get there. It's a very good one, and I will have it in mind also. Now that I have mentioned. Do we have anyone that has questions as regard tonight's class? I feel
Yes,
it's
some people were hands were raised earlier. I think Shaliwa was one of them.
yeah, Shaliwa. I want us to Shaliwa. Do you see have Shaliwa on the call? I'm not
I'm
sure. I don't
sorry,
think.
I didn't raise my hand.
Oh, okay, that was false positive. Okay, so in the absence of questions or no questions, thank you for joining the training today again. We'll continue tomorrow. I will upload tonight's training also on the YouTube page. If you want to rewatch, you can rewatch it. You can also share with your friends. Let them also watch. For those that are on the group for the 33 initiative, let us drop our picture, your name, your location. You can just say Lagos, Nigeria. So your location, what you do, you understand, so that we can see whether we can patronize you also. Right? Say, hey, I might have a business that I need to give out. And then you can do that business. So these are things that we need. Let's start dropping it on the group. And then before we go, let me stop recording. I want to say something in case we have anyone that can help.